Nori also.
Nori?
So for all of us in the room, including you've got your mics here on the table. When you want to speak, make sure you're speaking into a microphone, otherwise nobody will hear you. Same thing for the public, you've got microphones there. That one's live all the time, so if you're going to say something snarky about me, don't do it. People will hear it. So when you're ready to speak, you can, and this one will turn on.
And it's on a stapler.
And it's on, thank you for noticing that. So I have a MacGyver solution. I pulled it out of the podium. It was a mad scramble to get us set up here.
And I did want to completely thank and acknowledge the staff for running around and trying to get this format to work, because I think people liked it
Yeah, I think so
last
too.
time. Yeah. And that was something we had been hoping to do, hi Neil, for a long time, and just there's a very high threshold of technology issues as we experienced last time, but this is another stab at it that looks like it's going to be.
Yeah, this is like I was telling Victoria before, she like half of these cables are mine personally. So I'm a musician on the weekends, so I went and got my own cables to extend the cables from the dais so we could have more. So this is
my gosh.
very MacGyvered solution.
Yeah.
Sebastian and I made it happen.
Yes. It's
Thank you,
wonderful.
Sebastian.
Thank you for that effort.
Yeah.
Seriously, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, the extra effort.
Hopefully this will help also persuade the council to give you money.
Oh, I took pictures of this.
Did you?
Yeah. I'm going to put this in the budget this year.
That's
We're
awesome.
doing budget requests right now. So
That's
this,
awesome.
This room needs to be updated. Sebastian and our IT director, Joel, definitely agree with me. So I
Good.
think we'll get it.
You should get it.
Yeah.
It's long overdue. So even though it's a little bit after 2 and Dawn isn't here, I think we're going to start because we do have a fair number of people in the table. We have people in the Zoom room. And so welcome back to part 2 of the meeting from 2 days ago. We were looking basically at the idea of trying to consolidate different redundant parts of the document and sort of be able to look at it all at one time. That was something we did. We also, to those of you who weren't here, which most people were, we also kind of went around the room and talked about some high-level content issues. And today, I've been asked by various people if we could keep doing content-related issues, and I don't see why not. That's what we were doing before. We also have to get to, we probably completed the joint community meeting discussion. Yeah.
We need the committee to take action on the letter.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the status report on the landscape ordinance project. You want to start with that, Brandon?
Sure,
I don't mean to
it's gonna be a quick update.
shock you or anything, but that, maybe we get that out of the way.
Chairman, steal your microphone.
Yes.
One letter? What letter? It's the third, it's a budget request letter at the bottom of the agenda.
Yeah, it's on the agenda. Okay, so we're going to, as the chair said, we're going to jump around to item C on the agenda, which is a status report on landscape ordinance progress. So where we're at on that is I did receive a quote from Ground Studios, which is Bernard Trainer. And I'm not saying I'm not going to give you the numbers, but it was far over what we can afford for a landscape ordinance. Actually was larger than the contract with Nori Winter for the entire process of the Design Traditions project. So unfortunately, we were not going to be able to work with Bernard, at least in that full capacity. I do have some ideas where we may be able to pull him in at the end to review it as sort of like a peer review. But the good news is, I don't know if this is good news for me or not, but with the departure of the city forester, and if we've mentioned before, the city is endeavoring on working on updating the forest management plan, which dovetails, with a landscaping plan, with the design guidelines. And this is why I say maybe it's not good news for me, but I have offered to step in and help at least be involved with that forest management plan update. So I think that's actually going to help make sure there's continuity between the design guidelines and the forest management plan. And as it turns out, the company that's doing the forest management plan, Davy Resources, it's a large company focused on the West Coast. They actually have landscape regulatory services as well. So they're preparing the big forest management plan. I'm working on right now, seeing if I can bolt on to the contract to do the landscape ordinance, which actually would make it even more cohesive with the forest management plan. They showed us some of the materials that they put together. They're really beautiful. And I think just because they're a larger firm, it's going to be a little more cost effective. I'm sure what we would have gotten from Bernard and Ground Studios would have been wonderful, and he and I had a nice conversation. It just, it wasn't quite the right fit. They've got a lot of really big projects they're working on. And for, I think, the project that they felt they needed to do, we don't have the budget for it. So all that being said, we're still moving forward with the landscape ordinance. I should have an update soon about whether Davie Resources can do it. But like I said, I do want to try to get Bernard involved, if I can, as sort of a peer review at some point to get his eyes on it, because he has been involved in this process. Yeah, so that's the update, unless you guys have any questions about it.
What's the name of the company?
Davie, D-A-V-E-Y. You probably see their vehicles around town right now, so they're actually in the process of doing the survey around town of the trees. They're doing like 6,000 or 7,000 trees in town.
Any questions for Brandon? Questions from the Zoom room for Brandon? I don't know if they can hear me.
Anybody in the Zoom have a question? You can raise your hand or just go ahead and unmute yourself. Just about that specific item.
Thank you for that brief update. We'll look forward to hearing more as it develops. And I thought maybe we'd just keep going with the quick things so we don't not have them at the end. And that is this Downtown Trees budget request. Do you want to tell us about that, Doug?
Let's get
But
Doug
with
a
the-
microphone.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'll help you. I got it. You got it. Make sure you got the slide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The origin of this was a matter which Don Goodhue brought up at our December meeting about a walk he had taken on Dolores Street and seen multiple tree wells that were either empty or cemented over or paved over. And so the committee in December asked that a letter be prepared. There was a group of citizens made up of the former city forester, a former president of the Friends of Carmel Trees, and myself, and so we did a walking inventory of the downtown, and we came up with 206 locations just in the downtown where trees had previously existed. So in discussing where to go with the letter with the chair, it was decided to put a request in the council now as it is undertaking its budget ritual and ask them to appropriate funds to sort of replant the downtown and also to excavate those sites which have been filled in with pavement or brick or pavers.
Thank you, Doug. Did anyone else here see that budget request letter? I don't know, it was probably on the online packet.
I've got a
It-
spare one if someone would.
If you all want to just share, whatever.
It's up there too on the.
Oh, it's still up
Yeah,
there,
put it up
too?
there.
Okay. It basically is, we know you're in budget season. We know we have these observations, as Doug said, about the trees. And so there's a little urgency, even though it's not really on the, it's not really the purview of the Design Guidelines Committee to be, weigh in, but the budget is urgent, and that's what's being considered now. So since it was kind of in part of our studies, it seemed like it was a good time to put it in. But if anyone has any comments on that. Oh, Richard has his hand up over there in the Zoom room. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if the people did that walk, but probably were aware that on the east side of Dolores between Ocean and 7th, where my business is, where I'm sitting right now, apparently the utilities are so shallow that no tree wells are feasible. That's why they were all filled in on this block.
Right.
So, and that was the explanation. So I was working with a number of the other business owners on this block and had talked to Dale about it. What would be an appropriate planter that could hold shrubbery or something? There are multiple locations along this streetscape between parking spaces where one would fit. And what would we like to see with that? So that's just, and I've noticed that these glazed planter pots are showing up around town. I don't know if this is the point to discuss where we're talking about planting in the streetscape. Multiple, I think that's from Carmel Cares. I think we need to discuss what those look like and where they're appropriate. I think they're great up against buildings near the entrances of businesses, but not out where they put. Anyway, so yeah, so I don't know if we want to standardize or just walk around and look and see what's best, but some form of planter that's safe. Oh, must mention, it has to be safe in high winds. They get blown over. So that's, it's just what would look good, what would be secure, safe, et cetera, what kind of plants we want to put in. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. And we do have a commercial design guideline that I'm not sure we're going to be getting to in time today. We'll see. But that is also a place to start to maybe add more if we don't think it's covered adequately yet. I don't know if it is or not. I can't remember, but I'm sure that's exactly where that sort of thing belongs. Yeah.
Do we need a motion to send this?
Do we want to, by consent, we don't need to make a motion, but do we agree by consent to send the letter? If you just nod, I will consider that unanimous.
Madam Chair, I make one
Yes, sorry.
suggestion since since Mary Ann's not here.
Yes.
Her name is on this letter. You may want to consider taking, I'll leave it up to you, but
Yes.
she's not able to say yes or no on this. I imagine she'd go along with it, but
And I don't know if Doug sent it to her.
I did,
And in this
Yes.
latest form?
yes.
So it's,
and she said yes.
Yes.
So, okay.
okay, so then we have consensus without, by consensus. We're sending the letter.
Good.
Okay, good job, everybody. Okay, so we've got the little ones out of the way now, so we can go back to A. And as I said before, I was trying myself to wrap my head around the draft as we got it, and started consolidating pieces of information from around the document. And basically shared that with you, shared my internal work with you at the last meeting. And then I started another process. Again, this is all just a work process for me to understand this. But I had always been curious to see whether the redundancies, getting rid of those would make it more readable and more. So I did start doing that myself, and I have here a copy, and I only got halfway through residential, and I'm sorry, again, this is just literally last night, and I have a Ukrainian teen to take to swimming practice later, so I'm gonna try to get out of here early. So I really have, pressed for time. This is not a very long process, though, to try to take the redundancies that were kind of aggregated, don't have too many copies, together in that reformatting, and just see if it can just be rephrased without losing content. So I will just share with you that I think there's a desire to have a content discussion. That's what I've been told by people on the street, people on the phone. And what I did is I tried to as I was taking out extra redundancies and sentences that were identical to other sentences, I would sometimes, and I'm going to be very clear that anytime you see an italic is something that I thought, oh, this is something I've heard from the meeting the other day, or from the community, or from this committee, or, that might be inflecting it in a more clear direction for the community ones. However, that is entirely my secretarial, I'm the sort of young tech whippersnapper on the committee, and so it falls to me to, take a stab at it, but obviously this is just something for a guide or a tool for us to sort of discuss content and see what we think. And, ultimately it's, it's I don't know, it's a consensus, it's a project to see if we can make it more clear and more reflective. So I thought, like I said, I only have the first three, preserve, subordinate, and fit are in this short, you have 5 pages back and front. And I could just tell you as a quick sort of intro to the sorts of things that were brevity exercises. Like, if you look at what was, well, let's look at 1.1.8. This is about protecting trees during construction, And it says now, in the most sort of brief way I could think of, plan access and site development to protect trees during construction as provided in the land use code. Do not alter the grade level near nor excavate into the root zone or drip line of any healthy mature tree, whether on or adjacent to the site, including on abutting properties and in the right of way. So this is a combination of 1.1, what was formerly earlier this week, maybe twice as long as a paragraph. And there's nothing in there that changes the meaning, but it takes basically half of the bulk out, and it doesn't repeat any words. So there's a number of things like that through here. I don't know if that's of any interest to anyone, but again, trying to figure out what the deep or clear meaning is of a particular observation or directive or whatever we want to call it was my goal. But then when, for example, let's look at the first one, 1.1.1, before beginning design work, consult with the city forester. That used to say first, consult with the city forester. Melanie and I talked about that casually at one point, and we both thought, what does first mean? We don't really know. And I don't know if it means this, if it means before beginning design work, if it means before hiring some of it, it means, I don't know. But to me, that's an unclear content issue that we took a stab at because we didn't know what first meant. So we could go through this as if you like. I can't think of anything else, any other easier way to go through the content and just start with section 1, which, by the way, doesn't even have to stay as section 1, preserve, restore, and enhance the forest. There's been some talk about, someone was here last meeting saying there's an awful lot about the forest. So we might want to think about whether some of this belongs, as Brandon has suggested in the past, possibly in site prep regulations or tree protection regulations or things that actually aren't about design. So just to keep an eye out on that, we could maybe take a stab at section 1, and I'm just open to suggestions here, but that was kind of the sort of sequence that I figured to start at the beginning. Melanie,
So
did you have?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Just so in case anybody's wondering, because I'm still not totally clear. So you took the original, the first draft.
Reformatted.
You took the first draft.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you took the 6 guiding principles.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then you went through the entire first draft and pulled out stuff that you felt went under the first guiding principle? Or how did you arrive? I'm just trying to think.
Yeah, no,
Figure out how we got here.
Yeah, 2 days ago, the thing that was distributed and that is currently on the website is just all the same words from the draft we got on February 9th, but clustered in thematically so that we could see how much, bring together the scattered ideas and bring them, if they were friends with each other, if they were trying to address the same issue, put them together. And we, of course, were following the same exercise that Melanie and I did and that we did in the community, in the public, which was to sort of see where things fell and do they have to do with the forest, do they have to do with building details, et cetera. So that was also already kind of done.
But that was retaining all of the language for the
Yes.
first draft. And then what we have here is an attempt to actually edit
To
the
brevity.
language down.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And refine the language.
Yes. Oh, and that was the other thing. There was a letter we got, which I thought was very, I don't know, what would you say, like maybe prescient or predictive of a possible conflict we might have in this community, which is, somebody wrote to us and said, I'm very dismayed that these helping verbs, shalls and shoulds, are being messed with and being converted back and forth, and sometimes it should have been a should and now it's a shall. And we've had that conversation as a working group all year, that those types of words have been trip-ups for the Planning Commission. When I was on the Planning Commission, certainly for the public, for people trying to design homes, because you don't really know how strong a goal is if there's doubt in the word. And it doesn't mean that if you take the doubt out that you have to do the thing. You just don't have to spend your time debating the grammar. what does encourage mean? What does consider mean? When does may apply? So we had said, maybe since April, maybe a good thing to try is to remove all those words. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the document becomes law more than it was or less. It just means that you don't have to worry about the grammar. You don't have to have a
change to shall. Because I thought what
Removed.
everyone's been saying this whole time was change to shall.
I think early on, we talked about removing all of those words.
Yeah, but just because someone
Just-
sends us one letter and we get one comment, I don't think that we need to, move in that direction. The committee has heard from the public, the committee.
Can somebody get a microphone for
Oh, right here.
Melanie, please? Just pull, you can grab it at the base there. There you go.
I think we have discussed this since the very beginning, our first meeting.
Thank you.
And in order for the design traditions to mean anything, in order that they are not totally wishy-washy and ambiguous, which leads to problems of interpretation and implementation, we decided that we should strengthen the language.
Yeah,
We got
that's what I
one-
recall too, not
Yes.
removing stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think,
And-
I don't remember what you were talking about, Victoria,
All right,
about
let me-
removing shoulds
let me-
and shalls.
Can I just finish?
Sorry, Melanie, yeah, sorry.
And so I think we need to be extremely careful that the paths that we've started to take to implement what we've said from the beginning, we need a terse, concise document. And we need something that is user-friendly for everyone, the public, for the planning commission, for staff, so that the staff isn't caught in the middle with trying to interpret things, and they're kind of in a trap, so it hasn't worked well for anybody. And the document as it is now, even the new draft, is in some ways so much more cumbersome, and that's what I was trying to say on Monday. So what we've done is we've tried to come up with something like this, that we want to know how you feel about it after you've had a chance to look at it, and tell us if you think that it is a workable document, how it relates to the original draft that came out. And this isn't cast in stone by any means. We want you to look at this, digest it, and critique it. And there might be things in condensing so much that we might have lost some things. And so we need you to be really looking at this very vigilantly in terms of how this really would apply in everyday use. And we want everyone to be able to have a document when we land up that is going to be used and not thrown in the drawer and a bunch of city money wasted, because my feeling is that we would not be using this document. People would not really, be able to access all of these propositions that are in here and explanations if it were in the current form. So this is why we've got this form, and we'd really like you to talk to us about the form and then also talk to us about the contents so that we haven't lost things.
So
That's the
let me
most important.
let me just explain what was confusing that started this exchange. If you look at 2.3.0, it currently says, as of a brevity edit.
Which one are you looking at?
Just look at the one you're on now.
The draft one or the?
The one that I just passed out.
Okay.
It's out last night,
What page are you on?
2.3.0, page 6. So it now says subordinate parking facilities to the house and site. That's the concept that's always been in the guidelines for 20-some years. That same sentence before last night said, facilities for parking shall not dominate the design of the house or site. It's the same exact meaning, but there's no word shall. Subordinate parking facilities to the house and site versus facilities shall not dominate the design of the house or site. It's simply active voice, action verb, and no debate about whether it shall or should or may or consider or encourage. It's just a declarative sentence. That is something we discussed for a long time. That way, in my opinion, and I thought the opinion of the public and the committee, We are not we're not engaging in a discussion about the level of emotion or emphasis we want to put on anything. We are simply stating the values of the community. Now, what's fascinating about our community is that every single project goes through an individual case-by-case concierge level review through the staff, through the Planning Commission, sometimes through the council, and gets individual attention. And so if a project doesn't subordinate parking facilities to the house and site, but has a really great reason for not subordinating because there's something fabulous that no one ever thought of that fits perfectly with Carmel character, then that applicant gets to make that case. And that is, but at least you don't have to get up there and say, well, it says shall, or it says must, or it says should. Like, why should we have that discussion? We should have a discussion about whether the parking facilities are subordinate or not, and why.
Yeah, and it's a more positive approach.
Yeah.
Doing it, the sentence like that states what we really want, but it's more positive.
It's
Now,
just-
there are going to be situations where I think we have to use a must or a shall or a whatever.
I don't see
But,
any yet.
You know, but those will be probably few and far between.
I haven't seen any. And, but there are content issues that I think need to be clarified here for this community. And some of them are probably not that important. Some of them are minor and it doesn't really matter. But some of them are actually, so let me give you an example. We've had a lot of discussions in this working group all year long about how we prefer open space in the front yard. And that then if somebody feels the need for an enclosure, maybe it's a pet, maybe it's a child, whatever, then we prefer an open fence. And then David's not here today, but I had a very interesting phone call with David where he showed me, a dozen photos of stone gates and stone walls. And I would actually love to do that exercise publicly because didn't know what we were going to end up talking about, but he just very openly and curiously said to me, what do you think of these stone walls and stone pillars? Like, are they offensive? Are they great? They're all over the place. Are we really going to eliminate them? So he and I just had this sort of conference on the phone. I think this was yesterday, the day before. And I said, well, this one looks genuinely structural. This one looks veneered. We kind of went through and rated them. This one, the columns are too high. This one, there's modest. This one has an enormous timber, scary, heavy thing, not permitted by the design regs. So we sort of kind of rated them, and then we found that there was a commonality, and this is what he was trying to get me to do. The commonality of the good ones was that they were structurally authentic, that they were modest in scale, all these things. But also, another thing that we didn't have in here was that they are tied into the landscape and the architecture of the building in ways that the little wood fences don't need to be. It's very interesting. So this discovery we had is like, oh, it looks so much better when you have a stone house and it decides to attach a stone wall. Or there's stone garden elements or stone paving, and then all of a sudden it looks like the stone wall belongs. It's not just a sore thumb in the middle of a hedge or something, and it doesn't relate to the building. So if we look at, and again, this was not, this was just an organic discussion. It grew out of all the things that we've been talking about. But if you go to 2.5.0 on this current page 7, the big notion, the big sub-notion is blend private landscape with that of the public right-of-way to make vegetated spaces appear larger and to improve continuity with the forest. That was probably a should or a shall before, but now it's a blend. If you go down to the very first directive, it says design without a fence or wall along a street frontage. That's our default position, as far as I understand from the year of talking with everybody. 2.5.2 says where privacy or enclosure is needed, use shrubs, hedges, or vegetation. That's the preferred next step. 2.5.3, if vegetation does not provide sufficient safe enclosure, again, this is just an idea, along a street for children, pets, or others, install an informal unfinished wood fence, and this is all language that's already there, which preserves visual access into the front yard and at street intersections by using open pickets wherein the size of the spaces are at least equal to the size of the material. This is all, this is existing language. And then you step it up the next one, 2.5.4. When, oh, this is, sorry, this is a side for the arbor, which goes with the fence. 2.5.5, in rare cases where a fence is needed, but the predominant building material is stone, masonry, or stucco, a low garden wall of the same material and construction may fit into the site, and there's the only may I could ever have ever run across yet, if fully integrated with the topography and other hardscape, and if kept at 4 feet or less from grade, which is a rule now. So this is a proposal, it's all in italics, that I personally, as secretary and kind of computer person, have absorbed from this discussion for the last year. It may not be at all what
No,
we
it's
want.
very good, very good.
But it seemed to me it clarified, instead of saying, keep it open, and then when you design a fence, do this. It doesn't make clear that we actually prefer keeping it open. And then, even though it says we prefer it, it immediately goes into saying, and by the way, here's how you design a fence or a wall. It doesn't put it in the kind of, hierarchy that we've been discussing all year. So I just wanted to point out that that's a content suggestion that I'm absorbing from the year of conversation that is all in italics for your consideration. So
No, it's very good.
you like it.
It's
Melanie
very-
likes
no,
it.
very
Nobody's
good.
seen it before, so I'm just throwing it out there. So I thought that
Yeah, do you have
as,
this, I was gonna ask, do you have
Yes,
this
go.
digitally? Because I'd love to share this with Nori, who
Sure.
is the one contracted by the city to write these guidelines.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think it's nice too, but I worry maybe that, this is kind of a rewrite, honestly, of the guidelines in a way. I mean, it's all new language.
No, it's
We
mostly
talked
old
early on
language.
that.
No, it's
Mostly
really-
old language.
It's really,
Is it?
Brandon, honestly, it's really coming from everything that was in the text, except it's, it's arranged according to the 6 principles.
Mhm. Well, it is a rewrite.
I beg your
I
pardon?
mean, it is a rewrite, though. This one that we're looking at right now is a rewrite.
well, if you
right,
look, most
yeah.
of it is not italicized. So everything that's not italicized is original language. The only thing that's italicized is the part that says, when you don't do a fence, move to the next thing. When you don't do a hedge, move to the fence. When a fence doesn't work for you because of the architecture, move to a wall.
But
That's the only
basically,
addition.
Brandon, it's all of what is in that draft, but it's just put together differently under the 6 guiding principles that we liked, and it was an attempt, and Victoria's done an absolutely outstanding job of her computer work, because I tried going through and doing my own thing while she was doing hers, and then we came up, we were doing it the same way, except I was trying to do everything longhand. And Victoria said to me, well, I can do this on the computer. And so this is how we've gotten it all pulled together, but it's not different, Brandon. It's just the ideas are there, and we have put them into the 6 principles and then embellished the 6 principles with the language out of the original text.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Melanie. I don't know if I fully agree, because there is definitely new language. I mean, even, take just the simplest 2.3.0, just that title. It says, the original said facilities for parking shall not dominate the design of the house or site. The new, which isn't actually italicized, says subordinate parking facilities to the house and site.
Right. No,
So
I did not.
That is different language.
I did not just to be clear, I did not italicize things that did not change the meaning.
Oh, okay, so different
Yeah.
words, but
Yeah, in
not
other words,
italicized.
anything
Yeah.
that was just a grammar clarification is not italicized. Only the content. Nobody's trying to sneak content in or
Right.
out. It's,
and I'm not accusing, I just want to understand where the changes are, because, I mean, we, from the onset, I think that this group has agreed that the steering committee is not rewriting the guidelines. That's what Nori's.
well, you
was
don't,
paid
this
to
is
do.
not, these are not the guidelines. This is a
Yeah.
working document
Okay.
for us to see. I mean, I could not personally, and I think I'm a good guinea pig, I could not wrap my head around the 200 pages. And if I could not do that, I doubt that many other people could do it either. And so if I don't see like concepts next to each other, and if I don't see the grammar in declarative, simple sentences, then I cannot evaluate the
Well, that made sense to me, the first exercise of like reorganizing it, but this is also adding in now new language. So it's hard to tell
but you
like
want,
where the draft starts and the
Right.
new language from Victoria starts.
don't think of it as, it is not a guideline, it is a working document so that we can evaluate the content of our principles. Right, so for example, I think there's a very good example about the yards. Do we want as a community to make it clearer that the preference is open space first, but if you have privacy or security issues, you might add a hedge. And if that doesn't work for you because you have a little dog and it might get out, then you might consider the fence. If you do the fence, then you have to do the way we like the fences. And
Yeah.
then, so the question is that clear in the original document? And if it's clear enough and everybody thinks it's clear enough, that's fine. You want feedback on whether this document, as drafted by the consultant, is expressing the will of the community. That's the question. I could not tell until I consolidated the language and greatly shortened it.
Well, that's my point, is that
Yeah.
I guess this first thing that you guys did was great, where it kind of takes what was written, like the language that was written, as written by the consultant, and moves it around and kind of reorganizes it. But it's hard now with the second one to do any sort of comparison, like did we get the first one right or wrong? We don't know, because now there's new language written in here. So
So-
I know you have italicized where you said you put in new language, but you
Right.
did change other language and not italicize it. And then did stuff go away altogether?
So we can do a full track changes comparison.
Okay, yeah,
I'm
that'd
happy
be great,
to
yeah.
give that, but it is very, very crowded and hard to see when everything is crossed out and rewritten. And yes, this is a grammarian, school marm. My mother was an elementary school teacher. I was a teacher. This is a school marm journalistic edit to get to declarative sentences. It is, as the secretary of this enterprise, it was, yes, my judgment. Does this change the meaning? Does it merely clarify the meaning, et cetera? If I thought it changed the meaning rather than just make it declarative, then I italicized it. So, but we can certainly do a track change. But by the way, again, this is mostly so that we can have a discussion about the fences. Can we have a discussion about the fences?
And look at all the things in the draft that relate to the fences.
Yes, yes.
Because if we have to go back and forth in the document between, 3 or 4 different chapters, then
Yes.
it's impossible.
It's impossible.
And quite frankly, Brandon, I just have to say, as someone who reads every word, this whole exercise in the,
Can you speak into the microphone a little bit?
particularly, it's here, particularly, the residential guidelines, there is so much repetition. There are contradictions, there are redundancies, there's the division of different locations where you talk about fences, where you talk about windows, different locations. You don't get any consistent flow of what the city really wants and expects. And so I just want to tell you that Victoria has told you how frustrating it is for her. It's totally frustrating for me as a former planning commissioner, as a former person who sat on the original committee. We have said since day one we want user-friendly, and I'm sorry to keep harping, and we wanted a condensed vehicle that people are going to use and not get frustrated with the city. And it's not going to happen in the original draft. It's got to be put together in a way. This is outline form, bullet point form. So whatever form it is, it has to be grossly, I mean majorly, revised to be a user-friendly document. And Victoria and I basically came up with the same idea. We talked, and I started writing out my thing. I was so frustrated because in trying to organize things, it was just I was just like spending days and getting nowhere.
So I think we need to.
I agree with you. I
I
mean,
think we need
yeah.
to table the argument about whether it's useful to discuss the content in this way, because it doesn't, if it turns out that the draft, the first draft that came across the transom on the 9th is ideal as it is and really celebrated as an improvement and a more usable document, then of course that is how we should proceed, unchanged. If it turns out that there's some useful aspects to this type of discussion, then maybe the two get combined in a different way. I have no idea. This is an open-ended process, a community discussion. And what I'm finding is, I mean, we can just look at almost anything. I mean, this is, if you look at 2.1.3 about locating some floor area under fully or partially below grade, it says it like 6 different times. And so then when you rewrite it with declarative sentences, it's about a third the size, the paragraph, and you can see what it says. That's all. I cannot evaluate. I do not want to try to, as a English reader, to understand what is meant by a confusing sentence. If it turns out that the sentence, as edited, is not what we mean, then of course that is not, should not stand. If it clarifies what we mean, then that's just better. Carol.
I appreciate Brandon's sensitivity toward Nori, but Nori may not have a problem with this new way of organizing things at all. He might embrace it, and he's right here listening to us.
But
And
he's
so,
never seen it. He has no idea. We didn't get this. So
has he seen the 6 principles?
Oh, yeah. But
Okay.
He's fine. Like, those are in the original document.
Yeah.
Like, this just, we don't have this electronic, that was part of my question, too. Like,
It's
and
all-
I'm
it's
sorry,
all- no,
I
it's-
didn't mean to derail this, and I'm not trying to be.
No, it's on the steering committee website, as I mentioned at
The
the
one that you
beginning of
just
the
handed
meeting.
out today?
Yes, that is also there
Oh,
as
okay.
of last night. But the
Okay.
one from before, as you know, is on the steering
Yeah.
committee website also,
Yeah.
and again, I apologize. We got this document very late. So I'm going to express a little frustration that I have been working fairly hard to look and understand this document that is unwieldy and in a short amount of time. So we are all rolling up our sleeves and trying our best to actually dig into this and give you the feedback you asked for. So,
And I'm going to apologize, because I didn't mean, it wasn't trying to turn it into, I probably approached this the wrong way. Really what I was trying to get to was, how do we make sure we can track the progression so that if this is where we want to go, that we know how we got there? That's
Easy.
really all I was trying to say.
Happy to,
I
there
didn't
are ways.
mean to come across like we can't do this. I just was trying to wrap my head around it, because I have to then, I got to be able to explain this to Nori, who hasn't seen it yet.
Of course.
Yeah, so
And there's-
there was no disrespect meant.
Understand.
I'm sorry,
and
it's
no,
late
no,
on
no,
a Friday and I've
don't,
had
no,
a long
you
week,
don't, you don't need to
so.
apologize. I'm just telling
Okay.
you that we're all in the same situation. It's not just me, it's not the community. We are trying to keep this thing on track. We're trying to keep it timely. And it's just finally we have the fire hose opening on us. And so we have to figure out ways to break it down and chew on it. And this is a way to break it down and chew on it. And it's all electronic because, as Melanie said, I'm the only one who's got, who's into the computer and doing it. And every time I finish something, I throw it up on the steering committee. Usually it's at the last minute. This one was at midnight last night. So I apologize for that. There's just no time in the day.
Yeah, but
But-
we thank you very much.
Oh, well, no, listen.
Because,
Listen.
no, you have spent countless
It's okay.
hours.
It's okay. Let's not dwell on that. Please, people have their hands up.
From the perspective of somebody who is in the community and talking with others, this was overwhelming to the folks who reviewed it. It was overwhelming. And for those of you who are not on the, or who are on the phone, I'm holding up the original packet. This is lovely. I can read this, I can understand it, the flow is good. It fits in with the guiding principles. And I think if I gave people the choice of which one they wanted to read, this would be the one. My 2 cents.
Doug, you've been having your hand up.
It's okay. Everyone at this table and everyone in Zoom and everyone in this building has gone through an evolutionary process of editing. Whether it's a letter, a request for proposal, a term paper, a magazine, we've all done editing, and you take words out, you put words in, you try and make it the most condensed. The letter we just approved to go to the council originally was 2 pages. You know? And then I got some feedback from Mary Ann that it was too lengthy. And so we've received community feedback in the letters which Brandon has sent us that what we had received from Nori was too bulky. Nancy knows the CRA newsletter coming out, The Voice, has a reference to the bulkiness of what was received. So I think as we go through this editing process, we want to wean it down so it's easier to read and it's user-friendly. And I think we're on the right path with this.
There's only one way to know whether, I mean, yes, I think it's smaller. We can agree to that. Oh, Neil, go ahead. Sorry.
Works here. I like this as a designer. Okay. One thing I'm not sure that I heard mentioned, that Victoria's got instructors, so you're going from our most preferred solution to our second most, to our third most. So you're always right at the front of what we really want. And then you back away from, there's a constructive and instructive message in the structure. It teaches you. I like that. And the word shall and must, the concern I always have from shall is it almost takes it to legal. Well, if it says shall, then you should be able to sue them if they do not do it.
Right, right.
I wanted to get away from that a little bit, so this seems to handle that. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Anybody want to chime in on our process that we were trying to get past? But I'm happy to entertain anything from the Zoom room about how to engage in this discussion. Nobody's raising hands. And again, like I said, I was sorry for the long detour, but I was told people wanted to talk about content and that we kind of had everything consolidated in such a way that we could do that a little bit more easily. Like I said, I just took a brevity pass and started to integrate some content about the fence was just one example. I think it would be useful for us to maybe take it section by section, even subsection by subsection, and think about, again, like I said earlier, a comment that Brandon has made many times over the year, is some of this stuff even related to design, or is it handled better in a regulation, like protecting trees, which it sends a good message to a new applicant, but, you know, maybe, I don't know. I throw that out there as a question that came back to me from Brandon's thinking about how much is in here about the forest. But maybe we should just take, you know, we all know our 6 principles, at least as they stand now. The sub-principle of preserve, restore, and enhance is 1.1, preserve existing healthy upper canopy and lower canopy trees. If you look at that section right now, it's got 8 sub-points or directives, or I don't know what to call them, but most of this, as you see, is not italicized. It's all just original, not original grammar, but original concept. If there's anything that people just want to look at briefly on 1.1.0, preserve existing healthy upper canopy and lower canopy trees, and just see, is this the sort of stuff that belongs here? Is it, again, there's no real change to meaning here, I don't think. Of course, we can do a detailed look at that, Brandon, and make sure that's true through a track changes process.
Well, you're very good with words. I'm sure that it's right.
No. I mean, I don't use Word, so I would have to. I can.
Words.
Oh, words.
You're very good with words.
Oh, words. I thought you meant Word, Microsoft Word. I don't like Microsoft Word. I hate Microsoft Word.
Words. That's why
Okay.
I'm sure the meanings are fine. Like you have very good vocabulary.
Thank you. Well, but maybe just take a quick look at this, everybody, and see, does this seem like it belongs in design guidelines even? And that's just to you too, Brandon. You know, this is one of the areas where you've pointed out, I don't know, is this design?
Yeah, this is a question, and Brandon may be the best person to answer that question
Yes.
in the long run, because he's going to be involved in these other processes.
What? I mean,
Stapler.
I think, one thing, make a suggestion, I think we can do that, but if this format seems to be the new one that you did, Victoria, seems to be what everyone wants to do, what do you think it would take to do like the whole thing. So we have it all in like one
Well, like I
thing to
said,
review.
well, I just did this between these two meetings,
Yeah.
so, and I was very packed with schedule. Bye, Nancy. So
Bye, Nancy.
it actually, this is much easier than
Okay.
finding the different places that windows were mentioned and bringing them all under the same spot. So this is actually not going to take very long
Yeah.
comparatively.
'Cause I feel like that would be, if we can get this done and then send it out ahead of time, that we can all,
Yeah.
kind of do that exercise on it.
Yeah.
What belongs as regulatory, what's a guideline.
Well, then maybe what I'll do is tour you through
That'd be
the
good.
first
Yeah.
half of things I noticed. So I'd already pointed out the fence thing and trying to be clearer about what we mean about our sort of thresholds. And again, 1.1.1, Melanie and I weren't sure what first meant. First when you wake up in the morning, first when you're born, first, So we said before beginning design work. That's something to look out for. Is that what we mean? As you see, the first 4 things right now here are all about documents and procedures, actually, with the city forester, with the Forest and Beach Commission. These first 4 are grouped together because they all relate to that kind of process stuff. I don't know if it belongs there.
Before beginning design work is actually the most appropriate because we do a process called a preliminary site assessment, a PSA. And so that's when someone wants to do a project on a site, they call us, and the city forester and one of my staff goes out, and all we need at that point in the game is a site plan. Not a site plan, a survey map.
So maybe
so it
surveys
is true. I mean, that is true. Actually, before beginning design work, you're going to consult with the city forester, and it's going to be that preliminary site assessment process.
Maybe before that is the survey, is what you're saying. For if you go down to 1.1.4, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know enough about the process. Maybe that should be at the, or maybe none of this should be in here. But if survey comes before talking to the city forester, then maybe we rearrange these things. So it's a
Yeah.
thought maybe for you guys who know the process. Go ahead.
Victoria, I
Yes.
do think that this needs to be in here because it's really such an
Okay.
important step.
Okay.
I don't know how you feel, but.
Yeah.
About consulting with the
And I would
forester,
like-
but that's, I think
Or
what the
the
point is.
procedural
I think
stuff.
The whole thing about the forest and making sure.
Yeah, it does. I think what we're realizing though is maybe 1.1.1 and 1.1.4 are actually the same step.
Okay.
And do we have somewhere where step 1 for someone who wants to build something, they have to do this, and then they have to do this, and then they have to do this?
We do in our zoning code, we actually have a little kind of rudimentary flow chart.
Shouldn't
but-
that be in our design guidelines?
We could put it in there, yeah. I think we're gonna redo it. I mean, it needs to be redone. It's outdated and it's not pretty. It doesn't function very well.
If you look
That's
at the
your-
cover page of this, sorry, real quick, one of the appendices that occurred to me and Melanie was project review process as a appendix.
Then it's a document you can hand out to somebody too.
Yeah, a
It's not-
separate
It's not like
document.
go to, page 47 in the municipal code.
One
Neil, go ahead.
little caution, you guys, is that
Use the
the
mic, Neil.
process for approving
Neil, use the mic.
applications.
Just pull it over to me a little bit. There you go.
Process for approving applications is likely to change more frequently than the design guidelines.
So it
That's
should be
one reason
separated.
to
That's a,
Yeah,
Keep it very brief, or.
so just keep it
because
as an appendix.
Track 1, track 2 is gonna change as we go. but
Right.
This is gonna stay the same for 20 years.
Yeah.
right, well,
The appendices will be easy to change because it's
Yeah.
basically just an attachment.
and they can be sort of standalones, as
Yep.
you say, for distribution. They can also be appendices to this. So yeah, I think process is certainly important. Maybe these 4 things go in the process part, though. That's a question for us, I think. But you want it in front, it sounds like, so. I don't know.
I think if you've got somebody who's new to the city
Mhm.
and they're coming in because they want to scrape their lot and build a whole new house,
Mhm.
the first thing they need to recognize is that they have to really be aware of the forest
Mhm.
and their impacts on it.
Mhm.
So
So it's right up front.
That's a vote for the
Preserve,
forest.
restore, Enhance the
Mhm.
forest.
Mhm.
Can I ask you
Go
a
ahead,
question,
Brandon,
Victoria,
yes.
to wrap my head around this? So I'm
Please.
going backwards 3 steps now.
Yes.
So the first draft that came out, so like would I find section 1.1.4, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4?
Yeah.
Would I find those next to each other in the first draft that came out from Nori?
Mhm.
Would I? In the
Oh,
same
would
section?
you?
That's what I'm asking, or is that?
That's a good
Or is this
question.
the document? Because what I'm wondering is maybe what we're seeing is where these used to live, that context was needed, possibly based on what it was next to. So that's making that jump from the draft the way it was put out, taking it apart and putting it together in a different order, and then doing this exercise of saying, do we really want this stuff in there? It's missing that junction between the original draft, like maybe it actually serves a purpose.
I will show you, it's on, there's a copy on the steering committee website, but I can also send you other copies where all the formatting of the original February 9th document is still intact. It becomes very distracting, so then at one point I remove it, but I have kept every single version that I've gone through to sort of digest this document. So you will see that. And I think I explained this 2 days ago, but if I saw something that wasn't in what I'll call Nori's original directives, that was like a side essay,
Okay.
but there was only that reference to it and it seemed really important, and it was only in an image caption or it was only in a sidebar, whatever, then I would on occasion integrate it in. And you will see that in the formatted version earlier that I will show you if you're interested.
Yeah.
That it's in like pink italics.
Just because what made me realize this is
Yeah.
that 1.1.3 is the Forest and Beach Commission will comment on the effects of any proposed work. And that's really out of sequence there.
Yes.
So and that's
I have
no,
no
I don't. No, I'm
knowledge
not
of
saying.
sequence.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying like we're trying to figure out the sequence here, but it made me think. Oh, probably these four. Like we just take these first four. They were at different places
Yeah, I'm sure.
in that original document.
I'm sure they were.
Yeah. So.
But they relate to one another because they're procedural. They have to do with the forest and the site. And it would be nice if they were in a sequence that you think is appropriate, Brandon, and that they cohere together. I have no expertise on that.
What I'm wondering, though, I guess where I'm going with that question is, whatever this 1.1.3 was adjacent to in the original document, did it need it to be
Did it
adjacent
need its
to
adjacencies?
Yeah, and maybe it didn't come with these because it was related to something else. So
I-
that's the one thing I just.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think that it would have been my thought at the time as I extracted it, that it didn't need it, that it was just a nice piece of information.
Or it would have come with it.
Or that it came with it, or
Okay.
it was already
Yeah.
next to one of these
Okay.
things, or something like that. But, it was something I would have been on my mind, Brandon, but
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm infallible, so
Yeah.
I could have easily.
Okay, well, that'd be one thing I'd want to
Yes.
look at for sure. But yeah, this definitely makes sense the way this is going together.
So, everything else in this first section, so the first four are kind of these procedural and who's going to be involved and what are the documents involved and the surveys and stuff. Those could be one thing, they could be combined or resequenced. Then it looks to me like the 5, 6, 7, 8 are all about kind of how to handle construction and locate structures and buildings so that you don't mess up the forest. And again, if you look back to 1.1.0, the subheading, the second level heading, it seems like it goes there. But again, is that part of site management and really not that important to a guideline, a design guideline?
That gets to Brandon's point 2 days ago that if we had something in the back that says windows here, here, and here, because it depends on whether you're talking safety or
Privacy.
or privacy
Yeah.
or whatever, it would be appropriate in the difference of the 6.
Like Windows, comma, privacy, Windows, comma, safety.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and so that takes care of the issue of trying to squeeze everything under one heading when indeed it needs
Yeah.
to be addressed in
I'm
one
not-
or other.
Well, to me, my question here is, does it need to be here at all? Because, there was a vote for, please make people a little bit aware of the process in the design guidelines, because it's just to hit them over the head that this is really important to be careful with the forest.
Right.
But it's possible that
Yeah.
these are really regulatory things,
you.
like it's almost in the wrapping trees category, And that was my question to Brandon. I don't think this goes anywhere else. I think it just might not go here anywhere, because it's sort of, are you allowed to bring a bulldozer and bulldoze trees? No,
Instructions
that's in the
between buildings.
regulations. I don't know. It's something, throwing it out there as a
Yeah.
question.
So that was my friendly reminder that this room is booked at 4.
Okay. Well, we're at 3, so
I know.
we're pretty
That's-
good.
I think
And
someone actually has a meeting in here though, so
Okay.
that's what that was about. I'm sorry for the interruption.
No worries. So those are, I'll just throw out the questions, because we're not going to get through this whole thing. But so that's, for me, those are the questions that I noticed when
Yeah.
I put everything under 1.1.0, preserving the canopy and everything. For
Keep touring us. You're doing a
1.2.0,
good job with the tour. This is making more sense now.
for 1.2.0, it's a similar mandate, but it's all about the right-of-way. This entire thing is all about the right-of-way. Preserve or enhance the informal vegetated open space character of the right-of-way. So everything you'll see under 1.2.0 is about the right-of-way. This is one of my favorite sections, and I don't really know if it's appropriate for, I mean, people influence the right-of-way, so maybe it is appropriate, because the people think it's their yard, and we've had that discussion a lot, and it really is public land. So maybe this cannot go anywhere, but that would be a question for the public and the committee. So here we have some, and you'll see, here's a good example of something that was italicized in an earlier version, Brandon, because it came from like a picture caption, that the pavement curves around and emphasizes natural landscape features and topography, creating the appearance of meandering forested lane. I think that is so important for people to understand. And it was in a sidebar somewhere, and this is integrated into this to tell you why you're preserving, not why, but you're preserving the vegetation in order to curb the pavement and emphasize the natural landscape. So it tells you why you're doing the preserving of the vegetation. It just integrates what I think was a lovely passage from the original, and both the original draft and the current draft. It talks about removing any excess existing paving. You can see all of this stuff is not italicized. I see that I added retaining walls in italics. That is something I have seen come up time and time again. It wasn't in, it says a number of other above-ground encroachments, but I thought retaining walls is a good one to remind people that that is an above-ground encroachment. But that's the only thing.
Unpermitted, because retaining walls can be permitted, actually.
Okay, well, that's the question. And because I do believe that somewhere it says something like, if you can't access your site, then you can apply for a retaining wall.
I mean, sometimes there is a need for them.
Yeah, so that might be something
So
that
we probably
needs to
shouldn't have a
be
blanket statement that says remove all retaining walls.
unpermitted, yeah.
Yeah.
There's the gutter thing, which is, I guess, a right-of-way thing. It talks about how to, in 1.2.5, that the default, and this is actually exact parallel to the fence question. This is a good question for the steering committee and the community also. This is the same kind of situation where we have a default preference, we think, which is a forest floor, very natural in the right-of-way. But sometimes people do other things to the right-of-way. And the question is, what triggers? Is there an allowable trigger for things other than a natural forest floor? So, same exact type of sequence. 1.25, leave the right-of-way as an unpaved natural forest floor with an informal edge, unplanted except for trees on packed earth, mulch, and pine needles. This is language from both drafts, probably, both the old one and the February one. Again, edited for clarity. But then, in 1.2.6, this is a way to possibly handle this. When the right-of-way is too sloped or is otherwise too prone to erosion to preserve the natural forest floor, informal, drought-tolerant, green foliage, all the other stuff that comes into play may be added. Do not use bedding plants, blah, blah. That's all original language. So it basically clarifies, again, that there's a default, and then maybe there are situations. But if you're going to have that situation, then here's what you do. We've already established that in all of our language. Then there's, of course, don't remove trees and gravel. This is all original. We don't, there was something, actually I thought of this and didn't put it in, but I believe there's a regulation that we're not supposed to put irrigation equipment in the right-of-way. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that should probably be here. And I remembered that at one point.
Yeah, for like if you do landscaping in the right of way, it can't be irrigated landscaping.
Right.
Yeah.
And we do see that around town. And it's a shame because it's a waste of water, but it's indicative that maybe those species aren't meant to be there because they need that support.
Where do we want to stick that?
I don't know, maybe either 1.26 or 2.7? Because the 2.6 is about foliage and 2.7 is about what you gotta, oh, no, 2.7 is not appropriate.
2.6 is about
It would be
plant-
2.6.
yeah.
It would be 2.6. So that,
Just no irrigation in public right-of-way?
yeah, I mean, do not use bedding plants, exotic species, or any irrigation equipment, something to that effect.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, now we're on one, again, you guys can chime in anytime, please, Doug.
On 127,
Yeah,
I don't particularly want to have wood chips listed.
as surface materials for
Well, they're detrimental
parking?
to the trees, they suck up the moisture out of the ground,
Okay,
leaves less moisture for the tree. Plus, they get all over the sidewalks and
All
streets.
over the road.
okay, I'm taking it out,
Yeah,
unless anyone
they're no longer in
objects.
favor.
1.2.7.
We used to like them. They're
Just
no
taking out
longer
wood
in
chips.
favor.
Yeah.
Right.
There seemed to be several issues with wood chips, yeah.
And Dana Potter hates them.
Okay, we don't want to upset the mayor. Yeah, again, just, please chime in. This is still a tour, I'm just trying to ask questions for you guys, because we're not, like I said, we're not going to get through it, so you can contemplate at home, and then I will, as I work through the same exercise, I will throw it up on the site, and, you know, everybody.
You're doing this for all 6, right?
Yes, this is 3 out of 6.
Yeah.
That's all I could do.
Halfway through.
Till midnight. I'm halfway, exactly. Do not wall off properties. So this is a rephrasing of the same, we don't like, it was something like, we don't like walled off properties, or properties are not walled off, I think was something, do not wall off properties. Instead, extend so 1.3.0, preserve and enhance the forested image of the site. So we went from taking care of trees, just to review, preserving the right-of-way, and now we're on the site. Preserve and enhance the forest image of the site. Don't wall off things. 1.3.2 was just one of those examples where that was extremely, add a mix of upper and lower and all that. That was repeated maybe 6 times in the original clumping. And this is controversial, maybe. I threw in there last night as a reaction to a community comment 2 days ago. 1.3.3, do not plant trees where desired views of significant landscape features such as the ocean, hillsides, mountains, parklands, greenbelts, or waterways already exist. There might be a number of people in this room that don't like that idea. It was a reaction to what I perceive personally as a fear out in the community, possibly by a minority, that when you do have a natural existing view, the primacy of our tree hugging, and maybe Melanie hates this too. I'm a tree hugger, but if somebody said, I'm going to plant a redwood right here between you and your always enjoyed ocean view, I would think that's similar to what you might do with your building.
Well, I think if you remember, we actually had land use attorney Jason
Yes, that's
Rederer
right. Very
who
similar.
showed up also maybe 3 or 4 meetings ago. But his comment was less about, no plants at all, but more about don't plant something that's going to grow up into that view. So maybe there's a middle here where you can plant stuff there, but don't plant something that's going to take away the view.
That will mature into, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we can
Because
clarify
you can
that.
definitely plant things in a column where there's a view that's not going to be any taller than 2 feet.
Right.
And it's still going to be landscaping.
Well, this is trees, so maybe we can say tall trees or,
Well,
something
and
that,
maybe someone's view is 30 feet up in the air, so if
Right.
you plant, like a small oak tree, it's not
Right.
going to do it, but if you plant a redwood, it will do it.
right. Go ahead, Doug.
I'm opposed to anything in this document addressing views.
Really?
Right. Because what view are we talking about? Are we talking about a view from a living room, from a bedroom, from a bathroom, from a rooftop? And if you want to have an example of what happens with views, Brandon should call his predecessor in Laguna. They went through an 8 or 10-year process down there about how to protect views. And it's a very
Our
divisive
zoning,
issue.
our zoning code currently does protect views.
I know.
Yeah.
And so does
But
the
it only
design
protects views from structures right now. So I think that's where the conversation is. Unless Doug's saying, were you suggesting that you take that out of the zoning code too? We shouldn't protect views.
I would. I mean, there may
Yeah.
not be a majority to do it, but I just think it's a Pandora's box I wouldn't want to get into.
It is. They are often difficult hearings at the planning commission, I will say.
I've heard many times that should go to civil, and it shouldn't be part of the city process. If the neighbors have an issue with that, do it do it on a legal basis instead of having the city deal with it. It is huge, Doug is right about, a huge issue in these designs. Always the view, right? Planning, ask the planning commission.
Well, it's throughout these documents, so it's a radical proposition you're making, Doug. If we were to, and I'm not judging it one way or the other, but if we were to eliminate that, we'd be eliminating it from a lot of places. So the only thing that this was seeking to do, we already actually have content sort of to this effect. And again, if you were eliminating views altogether as a subject matter, then obviously this would go too. But it is, even views of other trees is a beautiful view in this town. So just a word for the things we're looking at, which are beautiful pieces of nature, I thought might help some people relax about thinking that they're going to get blocked from
and
those
just to clarify, the zoning code section that protects views does not protect views of trees necessarily. It's more about the significant ocean views, and that's what that view is all about, which it, again, becomes part of that debate when it does become a planning commission item, is because one person's beautiful view is one person. I don't care what that looks like.
It's just a tree, it's just a bush,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, it's probably an area that we need to look at. We don't have to talk about this right now, but the views issue is obviously very big deal. Don?
The section that talks about respecting your neighbors.
I think,
So that's
yeah, there's a lot about views in there, and that is under 3.0 mostly, fit your built structure to the neighbor.
I think you mean to remove that, right?
Pardon me?
You don't mean to remove this advice to respect your neighbors.
No.
Well, you'll see the view stuff coming up on mostly in 3.0.0. So anyway, that's let's see. There's stuff about drought tolerant. I have to say, from the grammar, Brandon, this is a question for you. There is a mandate or a directive that 75% of plantings have to be drought tolerant, but then in the same kind of cluster, it talks about native plants, and I wasn't sure if the 75% applied to that, or if it's 75% either native or drought tolerant.
This would be one. I mean, if we're looking at places to get rid of what's clearly regulatory language, this seems like an obvious one to me. I mean, this kind of stuff is going to be in a landscape ordinance, so I don't know it needs to be repeated in the design guidelines.
So, yeah, we might have like an R, a code for R, like if you put an R on it,
I mean,
maybe
it even
it
kind of
belongs.
says it right here. It says allocate at least 75% and follow the municipal code for more specific requirements. I mean, it really should just be follow the municipal code.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to, just like some of this other stuff that's about process or other regulatory documents, there may be a strong feeling in the community that sometimes you have to at least make folks aware that there's a concept here that they should see in the design guidelines and then go get the details.
A couple of sentences to clarify
Yeah.
for them, for those who don't want to go, steep themselves in all the links.
People shouldn't have to go to all the regulatory documents. I mean, especially people, when they're just trying to understand.
The look and feel.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And I think it's excellent that they're referenced for anyone who wants to go further. But I don't think that we should just shunt them off without even mentioning something like this. Shunt them off and say, read the zoning ordinance. I mean, do you understand? I mean, we, some of us, most of us work with this stuff a lot. I mean, and we don't mind doing that, but, you really turn people off if they don't have it one place, easy to access. And then you can reference something else and they can go there if they need more information. But you get the sense of what the city wants in an idea like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe our standard could be if we lose a kind of key look and feel type of direction, and if someone were to read this and think, oh, they don't care what kind of plants we use, then you wouldn't want them to leave with that impression.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just,
The only thing I worry about is the numbers. I mean, that's where I think because we have a separate document that regulates
And it
things,
could
so it could just say allocate predominantly, the plantings on site should predominantly be native drought tolerant species. Follow the municipal code for more specific requirements. So then
Good.
you know that it's supposed to be
Good.
predominantly, but I worry about numbers changing
Well,
between
and
documents.
And by the way, Brandon, in that particular one, and I can't even believe that I remember any of this because it's such a whirlwind, but I think there were two sentences. One was predominantly and one was 75%. And because 75% was more concrete, I left that one. But I think if that, especially since the code could change, maybe it'll go to 85% in some year, and then you don't want to have to go follow through. And so I think that's a good point.
You have a good memory. It says native and drought-tolerant species shall be predominant. At least 75% of plant materials on site shall be drought-tolerant.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
which one is it, 75 or predominant?
Yeah.
Maybe it's good to say predominant here, so we know people are on the right track, and then you give the exact numbers in
Yeah.
the municipal code.
And also thereby know that that's where the rule is.
Yes, yes. I think it's great, the idea of hyperlinking, by the way, in general, just still.
I after the last time I was thinking through and going back through the draft too, I think the inline hyperlinking is going to be better too. It makes more space on the sides, and yeah, then people just know that as much stuff in there is going to be hyperlinked as possible.
And that will help us stay more general, and you'll see that maybe a little bit here too with when we get to this hydrological stuff. So this is a new section, hydrologic features. We've never had it before. I think it's really interesting, and has to do with the forest, obviously, and how the forest ground plane works. These 3 points under here are about minimizing stormwater impacts, enhancing water quality, and then making sure that you do that in a natural looking way. This is all in fact, I don't see any italics here. I think this is probably just edited for grammar. I think the LID principles, maybe those would be in a different, maybe that's something to hyperlink to. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I think that's
terminology.
I think that's actually a state document.
Can I just
It's
go
a state
back-
document?
Can I
Yes,
just
go ahead.
back a second?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Go back to the previous
Mhm.
section that we were talking about.
Mhm.
1.3.6 on page 4.
Mhm.
It says keep manicured.
I added
lawns-
manicured.
Yeah, lawns out of the public view and do not use artificial turf. Oh, I totally agree with the last part of the sentence. I have an issue with the first part of the sentence because manufactured lawns, number one.
Manicured.
Manicured, well, yeah, excuse me. Manicured lawns are not traditional in the forest.
We heard Mike.
We have
Oh.
manicured lawns,
Get
any
those guys to
place,
stay
I'd
here.
have just a question about in the forest. Plus, it's, plus they use too much water.
Yeah, it says they keep them out of the public view. Are you
Yeah,
saying
I
you
know.
don't want them at all?
I'm just trying to make a point here to get some discussion going. Because we have quite a few places in town that use manicured lawns. And my concern is, number one, we've been in a drought for 20 years, and water is scarce. And just because we've had a wet winter doesn't mean we're going to have another wet winter. And number two, they're not traditional. It's not, forests don't have manicured lawns any place in them. And number three, it's just not traditional for Carmel to have these. A number of places that have been annexed to the city later in the city's development have manicured lawns. And so I'm just wondering, when we had the drought last time, quite a number of years ago, we didn't have lawns, and people understood that the reason why. I just have wondered why, in the last number of years with this drought, why we continue to even have lawns in the front. I think we need to think about that and talk about it, because it's an environmental issue, it's an aesthetic issue, and
Why don't we ask the table to
Yeah,
weigh in,
yeah,
and
no,
the
that's
Zoom
why
room
I
at
brought
the,
it up.
thank you,
Yeah.
Melanie.
yeah.
Yes, Don, go ahead.
I think the phraseology just suggests manicured lawn. I don't think we'd want to be suggesting them. This does.
Okay, so, yeah, because it says keep them out of the view,
Yeah.
but it implies you can have them.
That's right.
So do people feel strongly that, that is it's a big change, and I'm not saying I'm against it, but is there any, do you think there's community support for no lawns in anybody's yard?
Well, I think if it's explained the logic behind it, I think if the logic behind it's at least discussed, it's not, it's not as if we're making a decision for somebody. If we bring it up and we're discussing it, we should see how people really feel about it.
Well, how does this room feel? I'm curious.
If we don't have all kinds of them, why should we be worried about them?
If we don't have them dominating, you're saying?
If we have very few of them now, yeah. Maybe it's something, as somebody who works in design build for a lot of years, if you don't have to write a regulation, don't do it. The less you regulate, the more freedom there is to. So I was just saying, if manicured lawn's not a huge deal, maybe we can just not mention it, and it won't be an issue. Unless because there's a concern that they're going to all of a sudden take off. I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't.
Wait, let me hear that
Yeah.
from anyone else from the table. Want to weigh in on lawns in the forest?
I don't think
Take the
that's a good
stapler.
idea.
Take the stapler.
I'm trying to think of when someone would put a lawn in as opposed to pavers, or, if they need space in their yard and they don't want mud, that's an issue in the back. For example, if they have kids that run around back there. We've already said that we want drought-tolerant landscape. Maybe it isn't, as Neil says, maybe it's not that big a deal. I don't know.
Doug has a thought.
A couple months ago, Borough and Ridgewood.
I remember it. Yes.
I
Yeah.
remember you made a comment about that's not going to stay there.
Exactly.
And it didn't, it got
It didn't.
removed. There
That's
must
right.
be something already,
Yeah, our code already prohibits lawns, visible, manicured lawns from the public right of way, where you can see it from the street, so that's why that went away. One little wrinkle to this, a few years back in all the sort of like greening laws sent down from the state, artificial lawns actually, and we have a little bit, the way we've done it is kind of nuanced. You can see the original language. Lawns viewable from the front of, from the right of way or whatever, including artificial turf, are prohibited. But it gets hard to, the state said basically you can't deny artificial turf because it's so green and water friendly.
Which it's not, though.
Which it's not. I recognize
Okay,
that.
good,
It's
good. At
also-
least you know. I'm glad to hear it.
But that being said, we may run afoul of state law if we say no
Interesting.
artificial turf anywhere on the site. So where we were able to get around that was say, we just don't allow it in the front where you can see it.
Right.
But you can put as much artificial turf in your backyard where we can't see it as you want. So that's just something to think about in this. That's why it was written very specifically the way that it was.
And I suspected
Yeah.
that there was something
Yeah.
to it. And this is one of the reasons I threw it out there to sort of test,
Yep.
because those of us in this line of work know that this is a very environmentally damaging product, and it requires more water than regular lawns. It destroys ecosystems, all these things. And now I just
And
read.
it's made of plastic.
It's made of plastic. It seeps into the ground. They have these
Yeah.
little particles. And also, did you know, this is a recent article in the Times, the NFL now will not play on plastic turf because it is so dangerous from a health standpoint. Because the wounds get infected, they're more frequent, they're more, so for children, for pets, whatever. You have to use chemicals to wash the lawn in order to get the feces off of the lawn, and that goes into the water table, et cetera.
But yeah, those laws were put in place under the auspices of
The petroleum companies.
eco-friendliness.
Right, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So it was an under-researched and
Yeah.
misunderstood thing, and the NFL itself is now refusing this type of lawn. There's some,
Manicured, do we mean plastic?
No.
no, manicure just means like a sod, or
Yeah.
and watered and mowed,
Fertilized.
watered, mowed, fertilized, as opposed to like a natural meadow or something. Okay, Cindy has her hand up. Thank you for pointing that out. Whoever did that, Cindy, go ahead.
Hey, thanks very much, Victoria. As I'm listening to this discussion about lawns, growing up in Carmel, I always wondered why Devendorf Park was full of grass. It is and has been forever, and I doubt that will ever change. But saying that, one of the things that I always was curious about, lawns close to oak trees, and of course there's a big oak tree in Devendorf Park, but that is saying lawns are okay when you come into Carmel if you see Devendorf Park. On a completely different look at people and their gardens, somebody can decide to have an English cottage garden in their front area, and it's beautiful. It'll probably use twice as much water as the lawn. So from a water regulatory standpoint, I understand about not wanting lawns because of the water use, but there's so many other plants that are equally water thirsty that are not grass. That's just a thought on listening to you all. And thank you very much for what you're doing. It's just amazing.
Thank you, Cindy, for, I'm sure she's right. There's water thirsty species in every category. This is Melanie's objection, if I understand it. It has to do with the appropriateness of a lawn in a forest, not just the water issue. But I will also say that, again, from my line of work, there are species that require no water.
Yeah, I have one in that's what I use in my front yard. It's like
So-
it's a fescue mix.
Yes,
You
it's
just
a
put it out
meadow,
there
and they
yeah.
have like 5-foot deep
Yeah.
roots, and, there's meadows
Mm-hmm.
that are, in clearings in our forests. But anyway,
Just occurs to me, are we
Yes, Dawn, go ahead.
disallowing Devendorf Park?
say it again. Say it again.
Are we disallowing Devendorf Park?
Cindy wants to get, I understand Cindy to say we should close
I think-
Devendorf Park.
I
Is
think
that
she
right?
said she wants to turn it into a parking lot. Sorry, Cindy.
That's quite all right, Brandon. How did you read my mind?
Well, maybe one of the
No,
things,
I really wanted it for affordable housing.
There you go. Well done.
so Melanie, had this, I think, wonderful idea that's in the cover page of the appendices thing for a now preferred building and planting materials. We could potentially address that there too.
Sure.
If you have a ground cover, if it resembles a lawn in any way, it better be, or it should be, preferred if it is no water, 5-foot deep roots, or whatever those things are. So anyway, those are the issues right around here. I don't know, again, so you're going to maybe link to LID principles. That could be a link.
Could I go back
Yes,
a
please.
second to the artificial turf?
Yes.
If we've got, one of the things that we stress in here is the percolation. And it seems to me that artificial turf is not the answer.
Well, believe it or
That's
not,
what we're
actually, artificial turf does percolate pretty well. It's one of the
Does
few. Yeah, it does. It's the way it's constructed is it's meant to. Underneath it, if you look at it, it's like a bunch of holes. So it actually does percolate really well. It's like the only
Okay.
thing it does do well.
Thank you, I didn't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Because, it just looks like junk to me.
Yeah, it's like a net underneath like this. So
Okay.
it really does.
Okay.
But it does also have loose rubber particulates that percolate in. So it's percolating itself in too. So it's percolating, but not in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My-
Well, and the suns break down plastics. They, the polymers come out. It's gross.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
It's terrible if the
Yeah.
Yes, Doug, go ahead.
All in the water discussion?
Yeah, a what in the water?
In the water discussion?
A curveball? Okay, go.
Give them that one. Okay.
What about,
You're gonna get double mic'd.
what about swimming pools?
What about swimming pools?
They're not addressed in any of the documents?
Well, there's certainly not a plethora of swimming pools, much to, I grew up with a swimming pool in Florida, so obviously everybody has a swimming pool there, and I
That
grew up
might
in
be
the water.
one, like Neil was saying, like don't regulate.
Don't
something that doesn't need to be
don't bring
regulated.
it up. Are there swimming pools around that you have?
There was one recently down on Scenic,
Yeah.
the Patrice Pastor one, which went to the planning commission and had to be out of sight and all that stuff.
Well, what about the big community pool that we're building on Fifth and Dolores?
Community pool. That would be interesting.
What do you mean building? It's built.
well,
The pool is
Go
built.
ahead, Doug. What-
You're right.
The pool is built, my friend. Yeah.
But we're concerned about lawns and irrigation and water on 40 by 100-foot lots. But as more money comes into town and people multiply the lots that they own and probably want swimming pools, do we want to say anything about that?
Well, yeah, and the compounding.
Right.
So, well, these are site coverage issues for sure, right?
Yep.
Hot tub is also a site coverage issue. If you don't have any hardscape on your lot, but you have a hot tub, is that something that raises concerns? Let's say it's not blocking percolation because you've really minimized everything else, or is it the principle of having water? I'm not trying to get at Doug's question.
Well, I think a hot tub's a lot smaller than a swimming pool. The evaporation rates are smaller. You can cover a hot tub. Most people don't cover their pool. So it's a water issue.
Oh, you're saying, okay, it's from a water conservation standpoint,
But
yeah.
I mean, let's remember this is a design document, not a water regulatory document. I would offer that. I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's a good note about, how our zoning code might treat pools and hot tubs and water usage and things like that. But I don't know if just my opinion is, in using these documents, we wouldn't go to the design guidelines to talk about water usage.
But somebody should come to the city for those things,
They do, they have to,
for
Yeah.
lot coverage,
Yeah.
right?
even for hot tubs, Brandon?
for structure. So if it's still a structure.
Good,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, Don. Wait, turn.
And they have to,
turn the mic.
actually, may I add to that too.
Yes.
So not only do they have to come for the structure, but they have to get a building permit because those things have water and plumbing. And for us to sign off on a building permit, they have to go to the water management district and get a water permit.
Okay.
So that's all controlled already. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't get a pool or a hot tub without the sufficient water credits right now.
But we're trying to use simple language. I don't understand pre-development hydrologic features.
Where, okay, we're on
Or
LID.
1.4.0.
Page 4.
Page 4.
Uh,
I don't know what that means, so I wonder if the public knows what pre-development hydrologic features are.
That was something that was there already, not in the sub format here, the subtitle, but, yeah, I like the word pre-development because it means,
Okay.
before, like if the prior person moved something natural out of their way, this indicates, maybe you should put it back.
Is that what that was before?
It was that before.
Okay.
But before, a week ago,
Sure.
whatever. But yeah, no, you're right, that's not it's a cumbersome,
Yeah, I think we need to spell it out in simpler language.
yeah. Well, right below somewhere it says, it was this, the unaltered, don't alter natural drainage ways. I mean, natural drainage ways is pretty close to
Yeah, that's,
pre-development.
I think you had that. That was,
That's
this is
clear
what you
enough.
and Melanie did before. It says avoid altering or obscuring natural drainage ways.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
the original
So we could get rid of,
1.4.0.
point taken, Don, that is not very graceful wordage, but it was original. But maybe it's hard to understand.
maybe it's just pre-development natural features and not
Yeah,
alter
yeah.
natural drainage.
Yeah, maybe you're right,
What was the
natural
word? That
drainage,
was original to the first draft?
meaning to the February 9th draft.
It was?
The pre-development hydrological features, yes.
Oh, and then you guys did this one?
Well,
The
it's
1.4.0?
just in here now somewhere.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's still there, it's just floating around. Everything's floating around. All right, so 2.0, can we move to 2.0? Just again, tour-wise, and then, maybe you get the hang of it and you can tour the rest of the things on your own, but this is the subordinate every built structure to the character of the forest. This is the title of the section. The first subtitle is to nestle the building in the trees to minimize the mass visible from the public land. So that's a good example of nestling the building in the trees with some comment of Nori's off in a side column that is so lovely. And I just think, why can't that be an active verb? It's lovely. So we have the canopies, we have ways to decrease the apparent size of the building, ways to reduce the building height, minimizing other types of structures and their visual impact, and that's the first group. And I don't think there's any change in meaning to any of this, other than just, again, grammar and redundancy edits, brevity edits, I'm calling them. 2.2.0, follow the site's natural contours. I like the verb follow. That seems respectful of the nature. But anyway, so this is about stepping in 2.2.1, stepping everything. You're stepping the height, you're stepping the roofs, you're stepping the foundations.
Can I go back to 2.1
Yes,
quickly? Mass visible from public land. I don't know what that means.
Say
You
it
mean
again.
from public view?
Wait, where are you right now?
The heading 2.1.0.
Oh, visible from public land. Yeah, you could phrase it a different way. Minimize the mass. I think at one point it said as seen from public view or something like that.
I'd say public view is very clear.
Public view is better? Okay. Well, there's all sorts of ways to say that, and you'll see that throughout the document, that this concept of standing in the public street or the public or adjacent land, anything that's visible by the public even, is sometimes how it's phrased. Those are all, I think, useful ways, but maybe that's not the most elegant one. Okay, so stepping, we're down to stepping again, the contours, avoiding steep slopes. Okay, here's another one, very similar. I kept finding this pattern. So the fences and this sort of, the default of the fences or the no fences. Then there was the one about defaulting to the forest floor. Here's a similar one, I think, about grading. So 2.2.3 says, avoid abrupt changes in grade within a site and between adjoining properties. When such transitions are unavoidable, use sloped planted areas. That is not exactly how it is. Just so you know, we don't set a priority currently on what your technique is. So we have lots of ways to change grade. One is a tall wall, one is this multiple landscape terraces, and one is sloped planted areas. So those are the 3 stages. And again, as an attempt here to make the priority clear, this grammar has been sort of reworked so that it has a hierarchy. First, use sloped planted areas. Then, if slopes exceed the angle of repose, in other words, it's going to fall down, then use multiple landscape terraces rather than a single tall wall. So this is another example of adding a little bit of language to show that you don't just do this multiple landscape terraces if you could have done a natural slope. We say in the original thing, do both, but I think my sense of the community is always default to the natural one first. So that is added language, if slopes exceed the angle of repose, just so you see that, there's a condition in which you would have to go to a harder changing of the, you would have to excavate and fill and do things that we otherwise wouldn't want you to do. But what is that condition? I don't know if angle of repose is the right thing. It just popped to mind. But something along those lines. It's impossible to do it. There's something, excessive about the slope. I don't know.
Was the sloped planted areas in the...
That's in there somewhere.
That was in the first draft?
It was I think it was in 20 years ago. It was in February, and it was in the rearranged for sure. But again, the language is
Maybe it's in a different one.
floating.
It's not in this one.
I think it probably
Maybe
is
it's in a
somewhere.
different section.
Yeah, it
okay.
could have been. Sorry,
Yeah.
Brandon.
Oh, that's okay.
It's really overwhelming. So, okay, so that's that section. It's about contours. And finally, 2.3.0 is about parking facilities. And this was the one I pointed out before that was just got rid of a shall. Subordinate parking facilities to the house and site. There are, in 2.3.1, ways to minimize how, the impact of the thing. Nori has always had a thing about using the garage or parking facilities in general to as a tool for sculpting the site. This is another piece of if-then language that I thought needed, something like this might need to be in there for clarity, because we do have a line that's always, it's, I think, new maybe in this new draft, but the city may determine that a garage or a parking facility can encroach into the front setback, but we don't indicate any kind of threshold. It just says in some situations. So I thought, well, what we probably should hint at a threshold, like if it's beneficial to the city, for example, the city might do it. Maybe if it's a tough site situation, I don't know. So I just think that's for consideration for the staff and everybody else. Is there some threshold we want to indicate, or is it just like whimsical? The city might or might not allow you to put it into the front setback. There's all this stuff about ramping and retaining walls, and that's all original. Softening the look of the concrete or the paving material, that's all original. The muted colors. There's something in here about authentic textures, but I think we should deal with that more in the materials section that's coming up in section 4 and I didn't get a chance to get to. And then there's 2.5, blend private landscape with that of the public right-of-way to make vegetated spaces appear larger and improve continuity with the forest. And this is, we've already gone over this, but this is that question of the open, then to fences, then from fences to wall, or no, sorry, open to hedges, hedges to fences, fences to walls. So that's that, and see what you guys think of that. And then on Doug's insistence, the 2.6.0 now has dark sky referred to in the subtitle there. That I did a little research on last night, is a whole international
I gave a
code.
big presentation about it at the Planning Commission last year. It's actually the regulations and sort of like the philosophy that they wrote for the International Dark Sky. There's actually only, I think, 80 international dark sky places in the entire world. There's not many of them. And they're places like Joshua Tree, where you can actually pull it off. But they have a lot of really good language that we've been talking about on the zoning side of this, bringing into the zoning code that talks, and we actually have a lot of it in our code already.
I could tell.
The lumens and the height and all that stuff. So I think what a lot of jurisdictions do, and what I would propose we do, if we want to pull stuff in the design guidelines, that's great. But we're definitely going to be proposing to pull dark sky, international dark sky stuff. And this is what I told the Planning Commission a year and a half ago when I did this presentation before we even started this process, was we were going to pull a lot of that stuff into the zoning code because it does a really good job. We definitely, my opinion and the Planning Commission's opinion, we don't want to apply or try to become an international dark sky city because it's also really onerous. Like on an annual basis, you have to do all these reports and it's not really worth it, honestly. But you can take the website is a wealth of knowledge. There's a ton of great stuff there. So whatever we want to pull in, we can.
So, like, for example, I had a question, Brandon, on 2.6.1, use low lumen output light sources. Obviously, low should be defined
This
somewhere.
is all defined in the zoning code.
So that would
already.
be an underlined link right there, low lumen.
And then we may want to, if we're happy with the language, sorry, Victoria.
Go ahead.
If we were happy with the language earlier when we were talking about the landscaping, and it says like, look to the municipal code for more detail, or however it said it earlier, we should just repeat, follow the municipal code for more specific requirements. So we should just repeat that, I think, for things like this.
Yeah, and again, sometimes I think there's no way to underline anything as you go, and so you have to add a sentence like that.
Yep.
Or sometimes it can just be integrated into it could be sort of use low lumen standards, and then, that's underlined and people know there's a standard somewhere, and then they click on it.
Yep.
So, Doug, you're gonna have to take a look at this and see if this is adequate, since you've been the standard bearer for this.
And if you want to look, Doug, in, our lighting is actually in Title 15, believe it or not, the regulations, not in 17.
And it would be nice if we could refer, I like the word dark sky. It would be nice if, without invoking that we're gonna be doing a
That's
dark.
what I'd want to be,
Yeah.
I'd want to be careful about that because people definitely would grab onto that. We actually had people, when I was going through that process a year and a half ago, who thought we were an international dark sky
Because
city.
it's pretty dark.
It's pretty dark, but we're actually not even close.
Yeah,
to
I
what
believe
it
it.
requires.
I believe it.
Could I throw something at you?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
15 minutes.
So I'm hoping maybe this time around we can give Nori a couple minutes to speak, just based on
Okay.
what he's been hearing.
Perfect.
And then I need like 5 minutes to reset the room for the 4 o'clock meeting. So if we
Okay.
could maybe wrap by like 3:50, 3:55.
Well, we could also.
Is this the last meeting of the steering committee before the sensitive meeting?
I don't think so.
No, I think, and also what we could do is if you guys will let me continue my secretarial work, I could, get through the rest of this and we could continue the meeting. And again.
Maybe like next week.
Let's have another
Yeah,
meeting.
like
Yeah.
late next week or something.
Yeah, and we can stop here at section 2. We don't have to, just because it's already typed up, that's meaningless. So we can go ahead and get to your other thoughts, Brandon, and skip.
If that's okay, but yeah, thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I apologize again, I really feel
Don't-
badly about how
don't
this started.
worry about
I
it.
wasn't trying to derail it or be
have a-
critical about it at all.
Quick question.
Yes.
Did we rewrite the guiding principles? I see the wording is slightly different, and this 3.0 is totally different from the
I don't
original.
think they've been rewritten for any time recently. So there was, but let's,
Note that for our discussion next time.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's, I don't know why you think that, so we'll let you and I talk about it, because nothing has changed since the last.
Let's talk about it at the next steering committee
Yeah.
meeting, actually. Not you guys do it
Okay.
up there.
Yes, yes.
Let's do it all as a group so we all understand
Yes.
what they are.
Okay, for sure.
Okay, Nori, do you want to, I'm sorry to rush you, but do you have like 3 to 5 minutes worth of just feedback, thoughts? I mean, hopefully you've been able to follow along. I know you don't have the stuff in front of you, I'm sorry, but
It's a lot of.
I'll send you the link if you don't have it. But do you have any feedback on the general sort of premise here of the reorganization and how we've been talking about this?
Well, as you say, it's kind of hard to follow without having the document in front of me. Sounds like a lot of hard work, and I do look forward to reviewing it. A question is, in this organizational structure, how does this relate to the city's two-step process of concept and final?
It's a good question.
I mean, that's one of the reasons
That's a
why
good
topics
question.
show up in two places in the document, of course,
Yes.
is because they're reflecting those two steps.
Yes, and as Brandon mentioned to me offline a while ago, that sometimes that it was the fact that originally this was two documents that may have led to so much redundancy. We've made a decision early on, all of us, Nori, Brandon, everybody, just that it would be a good idea to combine the documents. So yes, I think that has led to some redundancy. But to answer your question, Nori, I think the general sense of the community is that if you use this funnel approach where the biggest issues of a design are the first principles that, the first organizing principles, and then you get down to, in fact, it follows your diagram, Nori, of context, where you had like sort of, I don't have it in front of me, but citywide, village-wide context down to the block, down to, this is very similar. So it really isn't that different except for replacing single words with principles, which is something we wanted to do. So consider the forest, make sure you're subordinate to the forest, consider your neighbors, consider the historic context, consider your site and the modesty and the details. So it goes from like site design down to building design down to details. And that actually does follow, I think Neil has said this, and I'm an architect, it does follow general principles of how architects work. It is in line with general not resolving details, even sometimes style details and style approaches. There's not resolved at the beginning of a project. You're just trying to figure out the site and the resources and the client's desires.
Well, and I will say, I think I said this in the onset.
Yeah.
The design process for the 2+ years that I've been here, and from what I understood from my staff even before that, it hasn't been working with the one-step, two-step thing. It hasn't. Not that it doesn't work. I mean, that's just not how it has functionally turned into. Like, people come for that first round, the preliminary hearing, with much more than just a stick drawing, which maybe is fine. Like, it has seemed to work. And then we're going to be in some shape or form, there's going to be a design review board now, and so maybe having it all as just one document is good because we're going to have two different bodies now. Maybe there isn't going to be that original mass and stick that's already kind of done as part of the design.
We could never get people to do that
No,
for some
never.
reason.
They didn't want to. So
Yeah.
it didn't really get used that way.
Carol.
And I think what we also discussed was the advantages of having one document that doesn't talk about the details, and then they go to all this expense, and then suddenly they're surprised with the new details that they hadn't read about initially.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have it all there in front of them from the beginning.
Yeah, I think thanks, Nori. That was a really good point because we're going to be talking very soon about the design review board construct, and so we want to make sure we think about that. Anything else jump out at you, Nori?
Could we ask Nori if he recommends a two-step process? Does he have a feeling one way or the other?
I don't know if you could hear that, Nori, but one of the questions from the room was, do you recommend a two-step process necessarily? Is one better than the other, or it just kind of depends?
Well, it's just that I'd understood that in general, the community liked the two steps, and whether or not people are using whether the documents track that or not, but the idea of having people come in at a concept level first before they go too far, I think probably is good.
I agree.
And,
Yeah.
And I think keeping that in mind, how the document is used in the review process is going to be important.
And that would save the client money too, by the way, in a lot of cases. Could be a significant amount of money.
Yeah, and I think it just happens to be parallel. I think it's logical for architects and developers, but it's also does roughly follow a two-step process if you wanted to do that, because you're starting with the big pieces of a project and making sure they fit in the site properly, and you haven't messed up anybody's drainage or whatever. And then, you don't have to go to principle 5 or 6 until,
Yeah.
You come back again if you want.
Yeah, until you're
So
picking
it's-
your materials and all
Yeah,
that.
so it's
it's a
kind of in
choice.
order anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Nori, any other early thoughts? I'll send this to you when I get back to my desk.
Yeah, I'll look at it all
Okay.
next week. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you, Nori. Thanks for sitting through all this chaos. We appreciate it.
And then I will do unless we want to try to figure it out right in this moment, I can do a analog doodle poll of you guys individually and see when we want to meet next week. But I know, Victoria, you and I originally talked that Thursday and Friday next week we're looking
Yeah, because
good
you've
for the
got,
two of us.
you've got meetings too, that are primarily front-loaded in the
I
week,
do,
yeah?
Yeah, Thursday and Friday mornings next week are both pretty good for me.
I can do Thursday anytime, I can't do Friday.
I've
Okay,
got,
what
how
time?
about Thursday 9 to noon? I'll throw that out there. Anybody have a problem with that?
I can do Thursday 9 to noon. Mhm.
Dawn?
As far as I know.
Okay, that's a commitment, okay.
What day is it?
As far as I know, it's a commitment. It's
Thursday?
Thursday,
Yeah,
the
what-
9th.
The
What's the
9th?
date?
The
No,
9th, the 9th.
9 to noon.
What was the
You
time?
can make it, Neil?
9
Okay,
a.m.
whoa,
What
good.
was the time?
9
9
a.m., Neil.
And of course, I'll send out the constant contact blast and we'll renotice it. And even though we're continuing, we did the full noticing for this, even though we continued it. We did it down at the post office and
Oh, nice.
all that
Well,
stuff.
that's above and
Will
beyond.
there be room for public comment? The CPA needs to make some comments about yesterday's meeting and just sort of round things up.
You mean?
Yesterday's meeting?
Yesterday's meeting? You're talking about,
Sorry,
Wednesday?
they all flow together.
this is the same meeting,
This is
Neil.
the same
So
meeting, yeah.
No, seriously, this is going to be
Just
part
continue,
3
yeah.
of the same meeting. So of
Yeah.
course, you're welcome to comment at any time on anything we're talking about in this 3-part meeting.
Just not now though, because we
Right,
have to
because now we
wrap
got to
up.
get Brandon's furniture moving
That's right.
service
That's right.
the room. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for making this facilitated process with
It's
your
getting
musical equipment.
Yeah, I'll try to.
It's
I'll try to
awesome.
figure out next time how to get more of the mics down here to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't give up a stapler.
That's very kind of you. I know, we'll take care of it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for, I'm going to be able to get to the swimming pool, so I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in part 3.
Hey guys, really though, seriously, I feel